Bill Moyer, not to be confused with Bill Moyers, former White House press secretary and host of The Bill Moyers Show, a fantastic interview and analysis show. Also not to be confused with Bill Moyer, head of Backbone Campaign, a badass grassroots creative activism organization that does everything from block shell oil rigs to project messages of dissent and change and much, much more. No, this is in fact a third badass Bill Moyer, activist, principal organizer in the 1966 Chicago open housing movement along with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the author of the Movement Action Plan, a blueprint for social change that's been translated into dozens of languages and used by thousands of activists. The MAP, as it's called, is broken up into 8 stages of successful social movements, from business as usual, to a trigger event, to a movement taking off, to the perception of failure, to majority public awareness and interest, to success and the road ahead. The MAP is therefore not just a map, if you will, but also a warning and an encouragement. Take, for example, the perception of failure that haunts any movement as it really begins to gain not only public support, but therefore serious pushback from the powers that be. This time of perceived failure is something that all movements go through, oftentimes in waves. As one battle is won or lost, another waged. Activists are encouraged to move past this, to see past the fog of propaganda thrown to delegitimize their work, to move past that moment of doubt and press onwards. The MAP encourages activists to focus. Focus on informing and engaging the people so that we can all take hold of our power, the people's power. Indeed, Moyer notes in his introduction to MAP that activists often hold 2 conflicting models of power, the power elite and people power. The former is, of course, the idea that because the power elite hold the power, we must look to them for change. We have to appeal to their reason, their morals, use their channels and institutions, like lobbying, Congress, voting, etc. The latter idea, that we the people hold the power and the power elite are only the power elite because we let them be. This model of power, Moyer says, is the model of social movements. He writes, people power is the model used by social movements. The movement strategy is not only to use normal channels in an effort to persuade power holders, such as President Reagan, to change their minds, but also to alert, educate, and mobilize a discontented, impassioned, and determined grassroots population using nonviolent means beyond the normal parliamentary methods and institutions. It is important to note here that he says not only use, but also. As in, yes, we will still work in the channels of the power elite, but fuck if that's where we'll place all of our full hope in change. Keep in mind, for example, our current commander-in-chief won more than 51% of the popular vote twice in a row. Imagine what he would have lost by had more people been awake, had more people voted for a third party, had there been more activist candidates running. And this is key. As part of a larger concept of getting activists into office, into the system, like we've seen with Shama Sawant in Seattle and like we talked about last week with Daniel Lee in Culver City, it's important to vote, particularly locally, to bug the shit out of your members of Congress, to show up at their doors, and seriously, to not fucking re-elect them when they do stupid shit. Reminder here, 88% of Congress is up for election, so get on that. That being said, overwhelmingly, we need to see the power as in our hands. We need to dispel the idea that we are constituents only, and that our path to justice and freedom lies only in the path paved by those paid to oppress us. Like Melina Abdullah, professor of Pan-African Studies and organizer with Black Lives Matter, said on Democracy Now! Last week, when she was asked why Black Lives Matter has not endorsed any candidate in the 2016 elections, we know that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are built to entrench themselves. So no matter what the candidates attempt to do, being controlled by the two-party system is hugely problematic and is disempowering and oppressive to Black people. We need to break away from this notion that the only way of being democratic is engaging in electoral politics. And we're not telling people not to vote. We're simply not endorsing any presidential candidate, recognizing that where we want to put our time and energy is in the development of people to act in their own interest and on their own behalf. So we are pushing the real revolution. We know that the revolution won't come at the ballot box, And the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will be on the ground when the people rise up and demand something better, something more imaginative, and something more visionary. Boom. That pretty much says it. This acknowledgement of electoral politics combined with the powerful statement that we, the people, will not bow to this two-party theocracy made in the name of the Holy Father Dollar is just spot on. It's so right and so eloquently put and so inspiring. The focus on building up movements, building up the power of the people, recognizing the systemic path and using it when it serves the movement, but not waiting for it to serve the movement. In other words, creating activists, not acquiescents. And speaking of creating activists, let's jump cozy cues to a sister pamphlet of the map, The 4 Roles of an Activist. If you want to read more about Moyer's map, we will post our source in the show description and at the end of the show. But, you know, that you can also always... The 4 Roles of Activists, as explained by social activist Bill Moyer. Activists need to be seen as responsible citizens in order to win respect, acceptance, and legitimacy from the majority of ordinary citizens who must be won over for movements to succeed. Effective citizens say yes to society's core values, assuming that these are morally acceptable, and activists must also be rebels who say aloud no to social conditions and public policies that violate these values. It's not enough, however, to protest. Activists also need to be social change agents who work to educate and involve the general public, to oppose present policies and seek positive, constructive solutions. Finally, they must be reformers, who work with the official political and judicial structures to get solutions incorporated into laws and governmental policies and accepted as the conventional wisdom of the day. There you have it. Citizen, rebel, agent, and reformer, which just sounds like the most awesome collection of words to put on a business card, doesn't it? And you should. You totally should. Moyer goes into more depth as to what each of these roles mean and examples of how they fit into the movement. And once again, you can find a link to that at the end of the show, or of course,